Let's begin by imagining that it's 1983, 40 years ago. And I want you to think back or imagine what life was like. How did you purchase and consume resources and goods and services? What did transport look like? What about media and entertainment and recreation? What about technology? What was life like? And imagine you fell asleep. Not now, just imagine it. Imagine you fell asleep and you woke up today. What would life be like? What would have changed? What would have not changed? Schools. We're doing a complete disservice to our young people, because decade after decade goes by and we don't change and transform the most important function of our society. We get excited about TikTok and Facebook and the metaverse and crypto technology. We get excited about incredible transformations in our lives, but we don't change the essential and most important foundation of our existence, the thing that's going to make a great future for our next generation, and that is education. It never changes, does it? Now, if you want to create the perfect education pathway, you need to project into the future and think about what the world will be like. What an impossible task. Who would have imagined that we would have a world today that looks like it is? Who would imagine that we would have driverless cars? Who would have imagined that we would have robotics that was so small that could be inserted into a capsule with special medicine and swallowed, and that robot could be trained to take the medicine directly to that special site to cure serious illnesses? Who would have thought we would have solar panels that were see-through like glass? And who would have thought that we would be arguing about the benefits of artificial intelligence? But we always will, won't we? Because life certainly seems like it's the place where what we do is that there's a small group of loud voices that are professing ideas about the future, but an even larger group saying that they don't know what they're talking about. Those ideas are silly. Those ideas will never happen. So maybe the best way to predict the future is to listen to the people who have got the crazy ideas, the contrarians, the people who have crazy ideas that aren't possibly true or we couldn't expect to ever happen. And maybe that's how we understand how to prepare children for the next generation. Because we've always had naysayers, haven't we? We've always had people that have disagreed about the ideas for the future. It started with a man named Plato. More than 2,000 years ago, he said, if men learn this, it will implant forgetfulness in their souls. He was speaking about books. He was speaking about the invention of writing and recording in books. He said they will cease to exercise memory because they rely on that which is written, calling things to remembrance no longer from within themselves, but by means of external marks. What you have discovered is a recipe not for memory, but reminder. 2,000 years ago, Plato said that it was a travesty to begin writing books and recording information. I remember my math teacher leading up to an exam saying to me, you better make sure you remember that. You better make sure you learn that, because when you're an adult, you're not going to be carrying a calculator around with you all the time, are you? And I remember a history teacher, and I hated history. The history teacher would tell me the same thing, and other subject teachers. You better remember that, because when you get out in the real world, I'm not going to be there. to help you. You're going to need to know that because you're not going to have access to any of that information anymore. See, maybe Plato was right, because what happened is that all the institutions that were created from 2,000 years ago to now were all built on the premises of books. What we believed is that we need to gather information and we need to create physical spaces or institutions for children to learn in. And they're all based on the premise that the most important thing was knowledge stored in books. And Plato said about books, they seem to talk to you as though you were intelligent, but if you ask them anything about what they say from a desire to be instructed, they go on telling just the same thing forever. And that's why we need to understand it's time to move on. It's time to burn the books. Yeah, you heard it right. It's time to burn the books. Because the truth is, if I write a book today and I edit it and publish it, and by the time it's distributed, the information's out of date. And schools are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on books. And they're storing it in their children's school bags and in their libraries for up to 10 years at a time. How relevant is that book anymore? How relevant is the application of that content and knowledge anymore? Think about how you learn things. How did you learn things today and last week and the week before? We've all got smartphones. If I want to understand something about cryptocurrency or blockchain technology or artificial intelligence, I go to TikTok. I go to YouTube. I go to words written and spoken on something far more powerful than thousands of old dusty books hiding in the back corners of libraries. Times are changing. And us educators are in a prehistoric paradigm. We're in a prehistoric paradigm that we can't get out of. And we're hypocrites. We don't have integrity. We're telling our children to be innovators of the future, but we're not. We're telling our children to think outside of the box, to come up with critical thinking ideas and to solve real-world problems, but we're not. We need to understand the concept of integration of technology. No, seriously, I mean true integration of technology. Schools are lining their classrooms and hallways full of iPads and computers, but they're not integrating technology. We don't understand truly how to integrate it and use it well. I'm not talking about PowerPoint. I'm not talking about clever marketing schemes that tell people exciting things about flashing lights and signals and boxes. So you buy a 3D printer, so what? Your child plugs a computer into a 3D printer and they print out a plastic toy. So what? Go to Toy World, buy your kid a toy. Technology should only be used to fix real-world problems. The rule for all sorts of technology in schools should be, if it doesn't enhance or accelerate learning, it shouldn't be used. If it doesn't accelerate or maximize academic performance, it shouldn't be there. And this is what we need to understand, is we need to find technology that accelerates and maximizes learning potential. And people are still criticizing artificial intelligence and these technologies because they're scared of it. Guess who's scared of it? The academics. Because the academics are going to lose their jobs if they don't embrace these new technologies and find ways to accelerate learning. Because things like artificial intelligence, they're the tutors of tomorrow. That's right, your parents will no longer be able to brag about that tutor they hired for you on a Saturday morning to their friends and peers. You have technology that can do that for you. We need to understand the concept of earning or learning. We need to remember that there are young people who are disengaged. The truth is, students that are neither earning an income or learning are a significant challenge to our society. It's not cost effective. We need to invest in young people and help them get into the new pathways. We need to help these children earn income and learn on the job so they're productive citizens for the future. We need to make sure that we understand the positive, productive benefits of these young people and get them focused in the education pathway. We need to understand the concept of just-in-time education. I was a teacher who became a principal. And then 10 years ago, I set up a company that sets up schools in all different corners of the globe. Nothing I learned at high school prepared me for what I'm doing now. But sometime in the last 5 to 10 years ago, I've had to learn things like how to create valuations for companies, finance, school design, a whole range of other things that I need to know. So we need to have a model of a voucher system where people can move in and move out of the education pathway. Not this lockstep approach we all follow. We go to kindergarten, we go to primary school, we go to high school, we go to university, we step out and go to work. Sometimes we go back to masters, but it's this lockstep process. My masters was not that relevant to me. Let me be honest with you. Why did I do my masters? I already knew, I think, most of what I learned at my masters, but someone I'd get a better job if I had that piece of paper. Getting that piece of paper didn't make me a more productive citizen with better outcomes, but it gave me that ticket. So we need to have a just-in-time education model where people move in and out of that education pathway to satisfy needs at the time. Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, what are they all famous for? They didn't attend Ivy League universities, or if they did, not for very long. Steve Jobs studied about fonts. And when he learned about fonts, he created a computer company that used new and innovative fonts and colors and focused on user-friendly technology. We need to understand the concept of recognizing prior learning. We need to track behaviors and skill sets and recognize the value in it. Why put people back through things they've already learnt before just to jump through hoops? We need to have processes that recognize skills that people already have. If you've worked at McDonald's, you understand the basics of finance. If you worked at Starbucks, you understand the basics of hospitality. I don't need to do a course to prove I can create a cappuccino. Just do it and watch me and tick it off. We're wasting children's time with meaningless tasks in this prehistoric paradigm of education and training that were created by our forefathers. And hypocritically, we never changed it. We need to understand real-world experiences. We need to make sure that education is deeply connected to industry. Now, born of those stories about Gates and Steve Jobs and Zuckerberg, etc., was a model that came out of New York called Praxis. Imagine this. You finish high school and you knock on the door of Apple and you say, hey, I want a job. Yep, you can start tomorrow. An internship, fully paid. Because Google and Facebook and these organizations, they don't want university degrees anymore. They said they're no longer a minimum requirement. But what you do is you start up with those companies and you roll in something called Praxis. And what they do is they identify the special skills and knowledge that you need to be successful in that job. And they create a unique pathway just for you to satisfy all of those things. And you begin that learning journey and you move in and out of workshops and training and other forums while you're working on the job. And at the end, you end up just like Steve Jobs, you work at Apple. Or just like Mark Zuckerberg, you work at Facebook. We need a personalized education model. Because to be honest, we're always focusing on the A's, aren't we? Every school will talk about it. Let us tell you about our brightest minds and brightest stars. That's where our spotlight always is. But you know what? Those kids do well in spite of the teacher. You ask those kids what grades they're getting, they say they get an A. What grade did you get last year? I got an A. Oh, you poor fella. You haven't improved. Or we focus on the disadvantaged, those kids that are messing up in the back of the room. We concentrate on them. But what about the anonymous kids? Because no child should be anonymous. What about the kids in the middle of the bell curve? Why don't we progress them? It's about distance traveled. Let's take kids from a C to a B. Let's take kids from a B to an A. That's education. It's not the spotlight on the top or the bottom. We need personalised learning programs that make a difference and get that child where they need to be, so they're successful, productive citizens in the world. And we need to talk about assessment. We're still assessing kids the way we were 100 years ago. We're not making good judgments. What's a B? What is it? It's this silly number that we attach to some kind of criteria that's not universal. But to a 7-year-old, you have a different kind of conversation. The 7-year-old explains to you, well, this is the first piece of work I did in week 1. See the spelling mistakes I made? The sentences are simple and not that complex. My vocabulary wasn't very interesting. But look at it now. Look at this other piece of work done 10 weeks later. No spelling mistakes, longer sentences. Now I can write paragraphs. Now it's interesting. Look at my vocabulary. That's assessment. That's judgment of quality. What's a B? Don't judge me by my high school diploma. Judge me by 63 countries and 12 countries I've worked in. Judge me by what I do today and tomorrow, not by a report card in that prehistoric paradigm I refer to. We need to create education pathways for the future. Our higher education pathway needs to be a just-in-time model, a voucher system where people move in and out. It needs to fully integrate technology in a meaningful way so that everything we do accelerates learning. It needs to be a model where we have strong cooperation between universities and between universities and industry. So it's lifelike and it's real. And it's not just in those archaic libraries of books that, let's face it, we don't spend any time in anymore anyway. It needs to be global and it needs to be interconnected. It needs to understand the connections between different cultures around the world. It needs to be focused on mindfulness and welfare. It needs to make kids happy. It needs to make kids successful. It needs to be an education pathway that makes a difference and makes a better generation into the future. Because right now there's a whole lot of people depressed about the pandemic and all these things that went wrong a few years ago, but I'm not. Because I see kids excited about TikTok and excited about artificial intelligence and these silly glasses that we're going to wear. Excited about now they can learn faster and they can learn more. Excited about the fact that they can learn Mandarin from a teacher in Beijing. They can learn physics from a teacher in Harvard while they're sitting here in Malaysia. And they can be happy. And they can be successful. And they can get out of those stingy old dusty libraries. And they can burn the books. Because we know that they're going to be ones that make a difference. Because they saw what previous generations didn't. A transformation, a new education pathway for the future that's really going to make a better generation tomorrow. Thank you.